Well, I did it. I made it to 500 subscribers, and I am not doing a subscriber special, unfortunately. So I did have plans to do something. I was thinking about doing the 2023 ranking videos, but I only saved two of the videos, unfortunately, and it would take a long time to have to get back all those old videos. So, in other words, I kind of just had to suck it up and just deal with this. So, unfortunately, you're not going to be seeing that video yet. I'll do that one eventually, and I'll do a 2024 one as well when I get the chance. But that's not the point. The point is, I'm going to do this what if, because I need something big to do for 500 subscribers, and I think this video seems like it'd be the coolest one to talk about. Today we talk about what if Dio got killed by the vampire from episode 2. If you don't remember, Dio took the stone mask when he was getting drunk because, his times of being a free man were over and he was going to get arrested for his crimes. And then he met two drunk people who made fun of him. Dio got angry, tried to kill one of them, tried to kill the other one with the stone mask, caused him to become a vampire, and Dio almost got killed because of this. And only survived because the sun came out at the right moment. So, what if Dio died? Let's presume maybe the sun just doesn't come out at the right moment, or maybe the sun can still somewhat come out, but the vampire is just able to kill Dio. And in this timeline, the vampire becomes our new main villain of Phantom Blood. Presumably, you could have both die, but if we went that route, then that basically just means that JoJo just becomes normal now, with no one to go after, and Pillarman would just take over because Jonathan would never meet Will, most likely. But hey, here's this timeline. An excuse to kind of talk about a what if where Dio basically just gets erased from all of Phantom Blood. So, what happens? Well, I'm going to talk about it. So, if we're beginning this part, aka Phantom Blood, in this alternative universe, Dio will end up meeting the drunk guys like he does in the canon. Dio is drunk around this time, but he kills one of the men, goes to kill the other one, but puts the stone mask on him to try to kill him that way. This causes him to become a vampire, like he does in the canon, but there's a big change, and that Dio does get killed. He gets his blood drained out, and he's killed. Around the same time, Jonathan would be at Ogre Street, where he meets Speedwagon, gets a doctor. All that goes the same as it canonically does, but however, Jonathan would be given the news that his younger brother. I don't think they ever said who was the older brother between Jonathan and Dio. I'm pretty sure it's Jonathan, but his brother Dio is dead. They found him dead in an alleyway with all of his blood sucked out. Jonathan would be confused and would obviously want to go and investigate. George the First would also be alive in this timeline, so I guess that's good. But then again, at the same time, knowing how much people hate him, I'm pretty sure that's probably not a good thing to them. But jokes aside, talking about that, I'm pretty sure Jonathan and Speedwagon and George the First probably would want to investigate the murder of Dio, since they would all want an answer. Jonathan would probably find some stuff about it. Maybe he finds the stone mask still there, assuming the vampire guy didn't take the mask. So Jonathan could find the mask and kind of just be confused about it. Maybe he does more investigating on the mask and would realize that maybe there might be more to this mask than Jonathan thought. Around this time, Jonathan would probably be with Arena and Speedwagon, and this would cause him to meet William Zappelli, which I'm assuming they would end up meeting still, because I'm pretty sure Will would be the one who tells Jonathan about what the stone mask does, because Jonathan would be more curious about it. Will tells him about vampires, he tells him all that, teaches him Hamon like he canonically does, and basically you got all that stuff going the same. And around this point, the vampire they'd be going against does not become a vampire like Dio. I doubt he would be having his own little subordinates. I doubt he would have a god complex like Dio. I doubt he would want to rule the world. He would want to obtain heaven. He would want to do anything Dio did on Phantom Blood or Stardust Crusaders or Stone Ocean. So he's probably just more of just a typical evil vampire, just lurking around, just being just overall not being a nice person. And I'm pretty sure that would be what we're dealing with here. Just someone who's not a good person, who's just going out of his way, traumatizing people in just different ways, whether he be killing them, drinking their blood, eating them, typical evil vampire stuff. And that would cause Jonathan to want to kill him because, for starters, he killed his brother Dio, and plus, he wants to be a good person. He wants to be a gentleman. And Will would help him. So there'd probably really be no real vampires, I guess, to go against. I'm pretty sure there might be some. Maybe he turned someone into a vampire on accident or something, but I don't think he'd really be doing anything Dio was doing in part 1 for sure. And this probably just leads to Phantom Blood basically just going the same when you really think about it. There isn't much else I could really think of for this to kind of happen, and I do believe that Jonathan would just eventually go on to meet Straightso and Speedway and Dyer and Tom Petty eventually later on, and still would probably meet Poco and his sister. But however, when they go against the vampire, there's a problem. He probably doesn't really know what he can capably do. So in other words, he's kind of just weak. Unless he was able to develop one of Dio's many powers. Let's assume he could use the Space Ripper Stingy Eyes. If he can do that, even then, it wouldn't be much help. He'd probably just not have much of the power to do it like how Dio did in Phantom Blood. He wouldn't be able to spam it out like how Straightso did. So if anything, this vampire, our new main antagonist, the drunk vampire man, probably just gets not probably, but actually straight up just gets killed. He's not really got the physical ability that Dio would have. He's not as smart as Dio. There's really nothing this guy would be capable of doing that could go against Dio. And hey, I may be wrong. This was a guy who only got 2 minutes of screen time in the entirety of Phantom Blood, and we don't know much about his character. For all you know, he may have an IQ of 400. He may have a 300 IQ. He may be a Harvard graduate. He may have invented something. Who knows? If he was all that, maybe he could have. But even then, it's probably unlikely. He was probably just some random old drunk dude that met Dio and then just had an unfortunate fate because of Dio. And, yeah, that's kind of just what would happen. I could probably see Will dying in this part, in my opinion, because the whole fate thing for Will. I could probably see him saving Jonathan or something, which probably is most likely what's going to happen. Jonathan probably would do something to screw up here, since he's never fought a vampire beforehand at this point. So I think he could screw up, and Will would be willing to sacrifice himself because of Jonathan's accidental screw up, give Jonathan some hormone, and then Jonathan would just absolutely wreck the vampire guy. And not only that, but Dyer would still be alive. Tom Petty, I guess, would be chilling. Maybe he can be an extra death as well, which I probably would have an extra death since he doesn't do nothing after Phantom Blood, so he should have just died. Straightso is obviously going to live. So is Speedwagon. So is Poco and his sister, even though they're not going to do much. Same with Arena. And also Jonathan would still be alive because there would be no wedding. And no wedding means that Jonathan never gets killed and gets his body taken by Dio. Which would actually have a lot of effects on the plot as well. Mainly due to the fact that I just don't think the vampire guy is going to be surviving. And I'm pretty sure he's just going to be dying to Jonathan. So, yeah, Jonathan can marry Arena. Jonathan gets his boat, his honeymoon on the boat. No Dio involvement. So Jonathan and Arena get to actually live happily ever after. And another change is that Lisa will actually be out of the story now. So in other words, this basically erases Lisa from the story, while also keeping Jonathan alive and also Dyer alive. So this would actually have some changes on the story, in my opinion. So talking about the next part changes, that's Battle Tendency. Or beforehand, let's talk about the changes that happened before the events of Battle Tendency. For starters, since there are no Dio minions left over because Dio is out of the story in this alternative universe, this actually would technically mean that George II would never die because we would never get the Zombie Commander. So he never ends up dying because the Zombie Commander really would not have any reason to exist. So he still is going to be alive, George II. Which I'm pretty sure there's quite a few people who are part of my fan base who would be pretty glad to hear these words uttered out of my mouth. Minus from the fact that George II would still be alive in this alternative universe. There's really nothing else I could really say. I'm pretty sure Mario Zeppeli would still die, but I actually do think Caesar's siblings could be raised by like Dyer and Straizo. And since there's no Lisa, I'm pretty sure Dyer and Straizo could help take care of Caesar's siblings and Caesar. So while Mario's out, they could probably come in and just take care of them instead. And this could probably cause Caesar's siblings to maybe learn Hamon. But then again, they'd probably just hate Caesar for for also abandoning them, which probably leads to more Zeppeli drama, I guess. An actual on-screen Zeppeli drama, which could be interesting. I don't think there's really else much I could really say for battle tendency at least here, like the flashback wise, except Lisa does not exist in this alternative universe, and Joseph would just have a different mother. I'm pretty sure George II can find a different woman to marry, and I'm pretty sure Jonathan and Irina would at least find a woman, either having an arranged marriage for George, or maybe George could just find his own woman. Who knows? Probably gonna be an arranged marriage, but then again, Jonathan seems like someone who isn't really as strict as his father, George I. So, yeah. And also, speaking of George I, George I actually would never die in the events of Phantom Blood. And he's probably still alive for a while. Obviously, he wouldn't be in Battle Tendency. I'm pretty sure he's going to die a couple years before the events of Battle Tendency. So, you could at least say that George I actually gets to meet his grandson, George II. And maybe even gets to meet Joseph, his great-grandson. Oh crap, I've just realized George I is gonna be Joseph. Oh my gosh, that is gonna be the most interesting encounter in all of JoJo for sure. Hey, at least George I was ever taught Hamon. Otherwise, it'd probably just make Joseph, Jotaro, Josuke, Giorno, and Jolene's life hell. Having strict, annoying George I blabbering about how they need to be more honorable and crap. It'd probably take a while for the Joestars to get used to him, and eventually, and if anything, it's possible one of the JoJos may just end up killing George I in one of their parts if he learned Hamon. Oh my gosh, I just realized that would be kind of hilarious, not gonna lie. Okay, and now, actually kind of going past that, George I, obviously his whole thing, he probably does get to actually live a longer life. He probably get to meet George II for sure. He was in like his 50s when he died, right? His 40s, 50s, 60s maybe. He'd probably die. He'd probably at least get to meet Joseph maybe, but he'd probably just still die. He's not going to live a long life, that is for sure. Or at least he's not going to make it to Battle Tendency. He's way too old for that. But, I guess regarding Battle Tendencies changes, so I think the first real change I could talk about in Battle Tendency would be the fact that when it comes down to it, I'm pretty sure that Straizo would never become a vampire. Obviously, you got Jonathan and Dyer here, so they could talk him out of it. Now, I still think the whole someone going to the Nazi base thing could happen still, which I'm going to say is George II goes in, because Germany and the UK were actually enemies during World War One, and since there's a World War II, and George would probably be against the idea of another war, since World War One was considered the war to end all wars, having George II run in to try to stop the Nazis from awakening the Pillarmen and all that stuff would make a lot of sense. And I think this would actually cause a lot of the Hamon fighters, or at least a few of them, to join in and try to help George or try to talk him out of it, but it would fail. Now, obviously, I think one or two of them should stay back and actually get the chance to meet Joseph and inform Joseph about everything going on, which kind of what Straizo did in the canon, but instead of informing him, like, hey, you gotta go do this, he tried to kill him. But I'm just gonna assume it's Jonathan, so we can have some grandfather-grandson bonding time, which would be pretty fun to watch. So Jonathan and Joseph actually get to work together, and they actually get to go against all these enemies together. So, yeah, they go against Donovan, the Sand Assassin dude, together, and that would be a cool arc to see them working together, in my opinion. And then we would obviously still get, like, the Tequila Joseph scene. Would be funny to see what Jonathan thinks the whole time. Probably shocked at Joseph's antics. Maybe a bit disrespected, but then again, he knows that Joseph was willing to do whatever it took to get into that Nazi base to save his family, so I'm pretty sure Jonathan may just let him off the hook. But Jonathan would probably say something about how he would never probably pull off something like that. But Joseph sneaks into the base, and him and Jonathan both dress up as Nazi soldiers to sneak in. And we kind of get a similar scene as we do in the canon, but instead Dyer and Straightso and George are also held hostage. And I'm pretty sure the Nazis would force George to try to fight off Santana, and this would then lead to Joseph and Jonathan coming in, and then Dyer and Straightso would obviously get in, and then those 5 can work together with Joe. And we got Jonathan, George, who would have Hamon by this point, probably, and then Straightso, and then Dyer, and then they work together with Joseph and Jonathan and Stroheim, and this would basically lead to these 7 actually going against Santana together. No, wait, actually it'd be Jonathan, George, Dyer, Straightso, Joseph, and Stroheim. So it's 6 versus 1. So it's a 6-people team. So it's 6 people going against Santana. And I'm pretty sure this would kind of just go the same. But even though Jonathan, Dyer, Straightso's Hamon and George's Hamon would be on no tier near the Pillarmen at this point, I'm pretty sure the extra help at least does do some good damage, but they don't really get to do much against Santana. This leads them going to Italy to meet Caesar and his siblings, because Caesar's siblings would be joining in this timeline, which Caesar's brothers would hate Caesar, and same with the sisters, except for the older one, who would try to be the peacemaker and the nice one, but they don't get along. When it comes down to the story, there's not really much I could really think of here, and I don't think too much would actually change at that point of the story. We'd obviously still get the battle with the Pillarmen, and I actually think that AC/DC would end up dying sooner in this timeline, so this would prevent Loggins from dying. Now, I do still think that, I still think Mark's gonna die regardless in this alternative universe, so I still think he's gonna die regardless, since his death was basically just unpreventable. But on the bright side, at least you could say that Loggins actually gets to live. So after that, I do think we would actually only just have... After this, we basically just skip over a lot of the part in general. So, no one really... There isn't really much else to really change here, except there would be no Santana fight. Also, there would be no beginning scene with Lisa, because Lisa wouldn't be here, as stated earlier, because... no boat crash and Dio invasion means that Lisa is going to actually just probably be just living a normal life with her family. So, there's that for Lisa. I still think they could take the others to the whole training place that Lisa originally took them to. And I'm pretty sure that just leads to everything kind of going the same as it canonically does, I guess. I don't know if they meet Machina and Loggins, but they could still meet, like, Susie Q, I'm pretty sure. I think someone else could be the one who knows Susie Q instead. Maybe, like, George or Jonathan. Probably not George, but, like, Jonathan or Straightso. Or, Dyer, maybe? I don't know. We'll say one of them maybe take the place of knowing Susie Q in the place of Joseph, so, yeah. That's kind of really all I could say at the moment. There'd obviously be no AC/DC fight. After that point, we would get to the Switzerland stuff. So everything in Switzerland with cars and Stroheim's big return of as a cyborg, all that kind of just goes the same. And then we obviously get to the whole Wamu fight, where Caesar's siblings would actually be more or less wanting Caesar to go in alone because they hope Caesar to die. Which seems really cruel to wish death upon your brother, but, like, he abandoned them, so I'd say it makes a lot of sense. And plus, Caesar wished Mario to die, so I'm pretty sure it's fitting here. But I actually do think that Caesar would get more help in this timeline, and I actually could see Dyer actually sacrificing himself here so that Caesar could survive, which I actually think would be a very fitting end for Dyer. And I think he could try to do his Thundercross split after Caesar does the bubble thing. So Dyer gets killed here when trying to attempt it. Kind of like how Caesar tried to go for a kick only to get hurt. And I think Dyer would actually die from his wounds here. But he would help Caesar in killing Wamu. And then Caesar would actually take the ring. So Wamu was actually taken out earlier in this timeline as well. So in other words, we've basically eliminated 2 Pillarmen much earlier than they canonically were eliminated. All because of, all this new stuff going on. And then, I guess for the final half of the story, I'm going to assume Jonathan just plays the Lisa role and goes against Cars. And then this would lead to Jonathan being outsmarted by Cars. Now, I'm not saying this means Kars is going to do the guitar solo on Jonathan's legs. I'll leave that up for your imagination, guys. You say, you guys. I'll leave that stuff up to your imagination and whether or not Jonathan's going to get guitar soloed. I'm pretty sure Straightso might get hurt in this fight. I don't know if he'll die. I think he might live. Probably not. I'm pretty sure in the case of Jonathan, I'm pretty sure Jonathan would at least get to live a longer life than Straightso. Or at least he'd be do more passion on his hormone training. So I actually think he'd look a lot better for his age. So if anything, I actually think Jonathan has a better chance of showing up past part 2. Straightso probably doesn't really have a chance. Hard to say. He looks kind of old and wasn't really as gifted in hormone as like Lisa was. So like it's hard to really say with him. He could show up in battle in Stardust Crusaders for sure if he does survive here, which he might. I don't know. Everything with the Joseph versus Car stuff goes the same. I could see George maybe helping out, maybe, or something like that. Like, maybe George can be on the plane with Joseph, and then maybe maybe George tries to tell Joseph and then Joseph can go to leave the plane. And then this could lead to George trying to sacrifice himself in the place of, Joseph, and then Stroheim saves George and Joseph, and then Joseph would sacrifice himself like he canonically does, and then Joseph dies, and then proceeds to come back and crash his own funeral like he canonically does. So basically, in other words, Loggins and Caesar are both alive. Caesar's siblings are important to the franchise now. Dyer is in part 2 and dies to Wamu. Jonathan's in part 2 and gets to live. Straightso was a good guy now and he gets to live. That's a lot of changing. A lot of changes for sure. Let's talk about the other parts now. So the next part we're going to talk about when it comes to change-wise is Stardust Crusaders. Now, off the bat, the only characters we really have here, in my opinion by this point, would be Jonathan, George, Joseph, Caesar, Julius, and Rose. Caesar's grandkids from my timelines. Stroheim, Dominic, and Nico, since Caesar's siblings are around in this timeline. They can help out in World War II with Caesar. So with those three, we're just going to assume Stroheim's able to live past World War II. And maybe Caesar's siblings are here as well, because I feel like that would make a lot of sense. And you'll see why. So obviously you have those characters, and we obviously still have Jotaro, Polnareff, Kakyoin, Abdul, and Iggy, all in the story. Now the question is, what happens with Dio? Well, obviously since Dio died, back in episode 2 to that random vampire, he's gone from the story, so substitute Dio with their new main villain. And when it comes to stands, we need the origin of stands. Who was the one who discovered the stand arrows and created that whole origin story? Diavolo, the main villain of JoJo. And since Giorno doesn't exist in this timeline, meaning that there's really no one to overthrow him in part 5, and plus seeing how Dio's gone, I think the only logical excuse here would be to have the new story be about going after Diavolo, or at least the Crusaders. And this could fit. Normally I would have Caesar's son, Gaius, would have him die to Dio, but for the sake of this timeline, I'm going to assume he goes against Diavolo and Passione. And that gives them their motivation to go after them. Now, as for how the Joestars get their stand, maybe Jonathan finds Inya because of fate, kind of like how Dio did. Maybe Jonathan's drawn to the same people who originally Dio met. I guess maybe Jonathan could take an arrow from Inya or buy it off of her. He gets stabbed by it, and maybe Joseph and George and Jotaro can develop their own stands eventually with Jonathan. And another change is that I don't think Holly would get a stand, mainly due to the fact that Jonathan's body wouldn't go out of whack because Dio has it, so Holly could control her stand. So that basically just leads to them being in the story. I still have no clue how Stroheim and his family could get their stands, but I'm going to assume Caesar, the siblings, since I'm assuming they're in the story, and Julius and Rose will all get their stands from Caesar's son Gaius getting killed. So it's kind of just one of those things where it's just there. And then obviously we have the same reasons on how Kakyo and Abdul, Polnareff, and Iggy get their stands. But however, I'm pretty sure a lot of stuff would change. For example, Kakyoin wouldn't be introduced as an enemy in my opinion, since he doesn't have a flesh bug on him, because I'm pretty sure Diavolo can't do that. And that also means Polnareff doesn't get a flesh bug on him. But Kakyoin and Polnareff could still meet the Crusaders because of fate and stuff, which I think makes a lot of sense. And plus, with the whole stand users attracting stand users thing, being in Japan, they could find Kakyoin pretty easily. And seeing how Polnareff was traveling around the world, and plus they were going to go to Italy, where France and Italy are very close to one another, Polnareff could definitely bump into the Crusaders somewhere along the lines during the adventure. Maybe Polnareff still decides to fight them because he was looking for the man who killed his sister. But that's really it, and I don't think Kakyoin would actually want to try to fight them in this timeline. Now, when it comes to enemies, this is a tough one for sure. Obviously, we could still have some Stardust Crusader enemies, like maybe J-Guile and Whole Horse, because they're associated with Enya. But we would probably also have some Passione enemies, characters like probably Chocolate and Secco, or maybe some of the elite guards. I don't know. We don't really know Karna's age, to be honest. And Squalo and Tiziano both look like they were in their early 20s, so I don't really think they're going to be here, because they were probably still kids during the events of Stardust Crusaders. Risotto was actually a teenager, so possibly he's there, but I don't think he was part of the Squadra yet, let alone Passione, so I don't know if he's going to be in the story. It's kind of a tough story for say, and it's kind of hard to write around it. And on a side note, I guess you can include Straitso, Machina, and Loggins, but that's kind of... it's kind of there, it's kind of debatable. We don't really know much about... I mean, maybe Straitso, since him and Jonathan are around the same age. If we're putting Jonathan here, we could put maybe Straitso here, since they are near each other's age. Excuse me, burped. Machina and Loggins, we don't know much about what happened to Machina, and I don't even know what Loggins would be up to. But maybe they're here, but we don't even know how they'd get a stand. With Straitso, maybe him and Jonathan meet Enya together, so that's like a justifiable reason you could have Straitso get a stand. He's the only one who I think would make any sense being in there, because he actually has the importance of the story. Machina Loggins, no offense to the Machina Loggins fans out there, they don't really have any importance to the story. But Jonathan is... But Straitso could probably travel with Jonathan and get a stand because the arrow. Now, regarding Diavolo and the enemies there, I'm pretty sure Chocolate and... Assuming Machina and Loggins are there, I'd probably just have them as extra throwaway deaths for Chocolate and Secco. Chocolate kills one of them with Grande's mold, and Secco can just destroy the other one with Oasis or something, drags them on the ground and beats the crap out of them while they're underground or something, suffocates them or something. I could see one of Caesar's siblings maybe dying here, or Caesar himself dying here. Maybe someone dies revealing Time Erasure, kind of playing that Kakyoin role, but I don't think it'd be Kakyoin himself doing it. Polnareff can maybe charge off to fight Diavolo, leading that whole thing going canon, in the canon, but I think Avdol would join in and Avdol would save Polnareff, with Avdol either dying in the process or just getting injured. Because knowing Avdol, he's probably going to die saving Polnareff, or almost die saving Polnareff. It's basically Avdol's fate. Another change, I guess, regarding this is what else could happen in Part 3. All I know is that Jotaro can maybe still gain Time Stop at the end, and this could end up being some kind of epic final clash between Time Stop versus Time Erasure, and that would be kind of cool to watch, not gonna lie. Now, if I had to pick who I would have live and die in this timeline, for Jonathan, I'm gonna have him die. He could do some kind of sacrifice and save Jotaro, and maybe Jotaro can gain Time Stop after Jonathan dies. George is going to live, mainly due to the fact that I think only Jonathan's going to die from the Joestar family. Joseph will live for the same logic I just said for George, and that would also apply to Jotaro as well. So, yeah. Caesar and from one of his siblings, hard to say. I could either see one or two of them dying to Diavolo, or maybe to a side enemy like Chocolate or Secco, maybe. Probably not. I'd say if Machina and Loggins are here, they can play that role of dying to Chocolate and Secco. But if they're not here, then maybe you can have one of them die here. If Straitso's here, then I could see him either dying to Then I could also see him either dying to Chocolate or Secco, or maybe making it to Diavolo. Hard to say with him. When it comes to the OC Crusaders, I'm gonna say they all four probably live, in my opinion. I think they seem most likely to live. And from the canon Crusaders, I only think Avdol's gonna die. Jotaro would survive. Polnareff would either survive or actually die. Maybe both Polnareff and Avdol die, or just Avdol dies. But I do think Polnareff stands a chance of maybe dying, or just getting injured from Diavolo. Kakyoin's going to survive, in my opinion. Iggy, I think, will survive as well. And that would kind of just be my overall opinion. And on a side note, something that'd be cool is maybe Whole Horse joins the Crusaders. I mean, I think it'd be cool. Maybe with having Caesar's sisters, maybe they train on Hamon and look like really young and pretty for their age, and that causes Whole Horse to hit on them. And plus with Rose and Nico, maybe Whole Horse just joins because he wants to be with the girls. And if that's the case, I think Whole Horse probably just survives part 3 in this timeline. Honestly, Whole Horse would be pretty busted against Diavolo when you think about it. But I do think that the team actually stands a chance in defeating Diavolo, but there would be some casualties for sure. But that's kind of all I really gotta say. Overall, Diavolo just gets killed like 12 years earlier because there's no Jarno and you need an excuse to make a new main villain. So yeah, boom, plop Diavolo in. He could play that role perfectly well. And that's kind of all I really gotta say here for part 3. So the next part we talk about is Diamond is Unbreakable. And this part actually could still happen. I mean, yeah, there's no more Dio. I mean, there's obviously no more Dio, but like, I don't think this would affect the story too much. And there's obviously a good reason to still go to Morio, because Joseph is still going to cheat on Josuke for Tomoko. I mean, cheat on Suzy Q for Tomoko. Sorry. Crap. Well, we have a lot of characters now, and the big difference here is that since there's no entire Italy thing, because Diavolo is already killed, that means more Crusaders actually could show up here. In fact, the surviving characters from Part 3 in this version, since there's no Diavolo, they could all show up here together to work against Kira. So, you know, characters like Polnareff, who's never been in Part 4 canonically, will be here. Characters like Julius, Dominic, and Iggy can join in the Part 2 as well. You know, this is actually kind of cool. You actually get more characters here. Caesar can maybe show up, assuming he doesn't die to Diavolo. Stroheim, I think, could show up, because I don't think he would die to Diavolo. Maybe he could die to, like, Chocolate or Secco, but I doubt any of them have the potential to kill him. Maybe Chocolate, but I don't think he could. But I could see Stroheim maybe being here if Chocolate didn't kill him. And I guess when it comes down to it, it's hard to exactly say what happens here in Part 3. I mean, in Part 4, I could see the part probably actually going somewhat similar to how it does in the canon, with obviously just more characters like Kakyoin around, maybe having like Rose, Julius, Dominic, Nico around. Polnareff can maybe be around, assuming Diavolo didn't kill him or something. Or maybe he's still alive, but maybe he still gets like that whole wheelchair treatment. It's hard to exactly say when it comes to Part 4 in this alternative universe. I still think we get the whole Josuke versus Kira stuff, and obviously the main story is about going after Kira, and obviously going after the other stand arrows from that the Nijibara brothers once had, then went to Akira, and then the other arrow that went to Kira. So there would actually still go to that whole storyline between them, in my honest opinion. I don't really know how much I could really say would change in Part 4, except with more characters around, you could arguably say that maybe more characters live. But if I'm going through, like, arc-wise, I'll just talk about the arcs that I actually think would be affected. Like, the beginning arcs, I could only see, like, Kakyoin going with Jotaro to Morio. Maybe Julius, but I don't... And maybe. Probably goes on his own boat. Maybe there's multiple boats that the Speedwagon Foundation send out. Or Zappelli Inc. can send out, but, like, I don't know. And then that could lead to the other characters showing up on different boats. But, I think Kakyoin's going to be with Jotaro, in my opinion. So those two can just be together. And then I could see Kakyoin watching the fight with Josuke and Jotaro. And then this could also lead to Kakyoin showing up for the fight with Angelo. And in my opinion, I don't think too much would really change, except Kakyoin's just really there to help out. Probably doesn't do too much, but he's just there to help out. Nothing else I could really see changing until we get to like the Red Hot Chili Pepper arc, where I could see a character from the previous part that ended up surviving actually being the one to play the role as the one to inform Jotaro about the other's arrival. Who is it? I don't really know. Maybe it's Polnareff, maybe it's Julius or Dominic who could play that role. It just depends on who you think would fit that role better. Probably Dominic, because his whole stand, in my opinion, would probably have to do with sounds. Julius has a stand that's to do with electricity, but then it would probably make sense for him to do it, but one of them or both of them can do it. It's hard to say. I'll leave that up to you. And then they can maybe help Kakyoin and Jotaro out against Akira, but I don't think too much would really change here. But Okuyasu can probably stay with Josuke and Koichi so they can defeat him earlier. And plus, with Joseph continuing his Hamon training, and plus, with a lot of the characters not being senile here, it'd be much easier to spot out Akira, so Having them be defeated before they go on the boat makes more sense, in my honest opinion. Um, Nothing else would really change except that all the remaining Crusaders are now here and get to reunite together. Nothing else is gonna change at the moment that I could fully think of, and I think when it comes down to it, we wouldn't really get too many changes except maybe some additional moments of the characters just kind of chilling with others. Like maybe Rose and Nico can be in like the Cinderella arc or something with Yukiko. Maybe we can get like Kakyoin or Whole Horse or someone like that helping out against like the Rat or something. Who knows? Maybe someone can join in for the Shigechi, but yeah, maybe the Shigechi episode. Probably not, but maybe. And maybe for like the Remy arc, we can get like some other characters, like extra characters helping out. Stuff like that can happen. But I guess the next change would be the sheer heart attack arc, as I think that Jotaro, Kakyoin, Polnareff, Julius, Dominic, and Koichi could do this arc together. Maybe you could add more characters, but I'm just gonna stick to these characters, which I think they make the most sense actually going in to help. Nico and Rose maybe can go in, but I don't know. Probably not. Just leave it to these guys. And it would be actually hard to say. If anything, they could defeat Kira quicker because they have so many characters. But then again, maybe a majority of them just get taken out by sheer heart attack with Jotaro. But assuming not, if it's just Jotaro gets taken out or Jotaro and an extra character, I think with the extra help, they should be able to do it. I imagine Julius should scale up to Star Platinum and Silver Chariot when it comes to strength and speed. So he should be able to destroy Kira. Same with Polnareff. So those two should blitz Kira. And I think Dominic could probably stand a chance against Kira. Whether he can defeat Kira or not is hard to say. And Kakyoin's range alone should be able to destroy Kira. But I do think Kira... But then again, between these characters, I do think Kira could win by either outwitting them or just getting lucky. And canonically, Kira has been shown to be very lucky. So I'm going to assume whoever gets stuck fighting Kira, or whichever Crusaders it is, Kira is able to win via luck, and is able to take them down, and then Jotaro can still do his beatdown, but with more help, maybe this means Kira never gets captured, meaning that Hayato never loses his dad. But that's kind of boring, so let's just assume Kira's still able to escape, and let's assume we still get the whole face swap stuff, and we'll just assume we could still get the final half of DIU resuming the same. Now, nothing's really going to change, because this whole stuff was like slice of life adventures, and I don't really see any of the Crusaders doing much here. But maybe like stuff like the Adam Heartfather arc could change. Maybe like George II or Joseph can play those roles in those fights. Maybe Caesar or Stroheim, I guess. I don't know. Chaotic Thursday is the only one that I think would actually have some changes, though. But that's just my opinion. And when it comes to the final arc with Kira, I could maybe see someone here dying to bite the dust. Maybe someone from the Zeppeli lineage. Probably not Julius or Rose, but maybe someone there could die like earlier on in the story and then like actually stay dead to bite the dust. Maybe Caesar's twin brothers end up taking the place of like Rohan, or maybe meet Hayato earlier, and that causes them to just get killed much quicker, so there's no way to prevent them from dying, I guess. Or maybe they can like take the role of like, or maybe one of the siblings could take the role of like the random girl. Like maybe the sisters could take the role of the random girl and her boyfriend. They go to a Morio department. Kira recognizes them as allies to the Morio cast, and plus knowing that they might be looking into him, he could go after one of Caesar's sisters and kill them, which I think could probably maybe also work. Maybe Caesar could also die to Kira. It's hard to say, but I could see one of those five actually dying to Kira. I could see someone from the Zeppeli family either dying to Kira at this point, even though I could see one of them dying to Diavolo, to like a reveal time erasure probably, or Epitaph. I could see the other one dying to Kira during part 4, during the ending half of that part. And I also think George II would die taking Okuyasu's place of that whole fake-out death. But instead, I think he would legit die. This is because I actually think this would be a pretty fitting ending for George. He gets to save his grandson, and plus kind of comes full circle for Diamond's Unbreakable to have Josuke defeat Kira and actually kill him in this timeline, and kind of comes full circle to the beginning of part 4. And at least it comes even better when it comes to full circle. Since part 4, Josuke's first enemy was a serial killer, and his last enemy was a serial killer. Not only that, but the serial killer that was his first enemy killed his grandfather from his mom's side. So the final serial killer he fights that's an enemy kills his grandfather from his father's side. So it kind of does come full circle. So it still comes full circle, but I think it also connects much better. And plus, Josuke actually defeats Kira, in my opinion, for this version. Since Okuyasu is around longer, they're able to take Stray Cat out a lot sooner, in my opinion. So Josuke could just take out Kira much sooner, I assume, with George sacrificing himself so that his grandson could live on, and him and Okuyasu and Hayato could defeat Kira together. There isn't much else I could say for Diamond is Unbreakable, except that I could see someone from the Zeppeli lineage or Stroheim dying. It's hard to say exactly, but I do think George is gonna die here at the end of part 4, giving him a proper emotional send off of his own and giving him the chance to say goodbye to Josuke once and for all. Now we go to part 5 and there's no part 5. Yeah, no part 5 because Dio, he doesn't exist. Or I mean, he does exist, but he's already gone from the story. So this means Giorno would end up just not existing. No Giorno also means that Diavolo could be in control still. But Diavolo's already been defeated earlier, so he's not even a threat anymore. So Italy is just a more, I guess, normal place. What could the story be about? Well, I mean, we still have Trish, so maybe the story can, I guess, take the place of Trish. I mean, technically the canon part 5 was the child of the main villain of part 3 going against the main villain. Maybe it works here in this timeline. Or maybe we got Frito, my Zeppeli OC, who can join in the story randomly. Maybe the story can be about them instead. I don't know. Bruno probably's working for, I guess, the Speedwagon Foundation or Zeppeli Incorporated, because they could probably take over Passione by that point, and that could probably just lead to Bruno working with them, I assume, after he finds out about the whole stuff there. He probably can just join them after he gets his stand and decides to help them out. And then maybe he can get Fugo, Narantia, Mista, and Abacchio some jobs there once he finds out about them. And maybe those 5 can just work for this for Joseph or Caesar or something. They could work for the Zeppelis or the Joestars. But they're probably just working through Italy, so there's really not much they can do. They're just helping out and taking better care of Italy, so there's no more evil stand users, maybe. Which could fit there, and it could be a nice way to kind of give them a good send-off. There isn't really much I could say for part 5 now that I think about it. Maybe Risotto or La Squadra can be the main threats, but like, I don't know what they're doing by this point. It's kind of hard to say. It's possible Risotto could still go after Trish, and the story can be Risotto versus Trish at the end. I don't know. This is very confusing. It's hard to say what the story would be about. I'll leave part 5 up to you guys. I don't really have an idea, or at least a full-on idea for how part 5 would work. So that's just my opinion there. And we go to the final part, Stone Ocean, part 6. So when it comes to part 6, this one is a lot harder as well. I mean, I still think part 6 could still exist. It kind of rhymed. But jokes aside. I think the story would have to be Jolene still getting framed and Jotaro still having to get his disc taken or something like that, or maybe Jotaro getting knocked out or stolen or something. And the story can be that someone from Passione is angry about Jotaro killing the former boss of Italy, so they go to Florida and they become Jolene's new antagonist, and then that ends up to becoming a story where some ex-Passione member wants revenge on Jolene and Jotaro, and then that could kind of lead to a similar Stone Ocean, but I guess in some different circumstances. And it's hard to work on this one because there's really nothing that's important here to discuss. I mean, maybe there is the arrow. Maybe the enemy wants the Requiem arrow. Maybe Jotaro has the arrow with them, and maybe they take the maybe in this timeline the Requiem arrow is their main MacGuffin, and maybe they have a stand that has the ability to read memories or something like how Whitesnake does. So they look in to see how Requiem works, and that could lead to them wanting to get Requiem for themselves, and that could lead to Jolene trying to get out of the prison and trying to stop that maybe. I don't know. And this could still lead to Tenmei, Julie's and Nico's daughter, which I have a name for, but I'm not going to bother to pronounce. Michael, which would be Polnareff's son, and then Nico, which would be Dominic's daughter. And I think those 4 could still be part of the story. And when it comes to characters who would be in the canon part 6 and whether or not they're part of the story, Anasui and Hermes and Emporio can still be part of the adventure. Because Pucci really had no real effects on their life. Kind of ironic since they're the only characters that got a happy ending at the end of Stone Ocean, since in a world where Pucci doesn't exist. But despite that, there's no real consequence to Pucci. Assuming that the enemy just doesn't work with Sports Max, which we'll assume that enemy does, and that could still lead to Hermes going against and joining Jolene and their team, I guess. Anasui probably could still. Anasui has the best chance of joining. Same with Emporio. Emporio because Jolene's the only hope of getting them out, and Anasui because of his weird crush on Jolene. In the case of Hermes, she probably only really joins because she's there. she probably wants to still stop Sports Max. So maybe the enemy works with Sports Max, kind of finding a way to use Limp Bizkit in a creative enough manner, and that can just lead to Hermes wanting to go after Sports Max still, and that could still lead to her helping out. But we don't have Foo Fighters because Foo Fighters wouldn't exist because Pucci's not part of the story. So no stand disc unless this enemy has a disc-like ability like Whitesnake. And also, no weather report. Because, no Pucci and weather report. Because there's no Dio. No Dio to get involved into Pucci's life means that Pucci most likely wouldn't be getting a stand. Meaning that weather report is either going to die by getting hung by the KKK, or alternatively, Pucci just ends up actually telling Perla and Weather, the truth, and then it would be weird for sure. It would probably not be believable at first, but then again, with DNA testing being really new, Pucci can do the DNA test and force them to do it, and then that could just reveal the truth. I don't know if it would work, but maybe. And then that could maybe be one way they do it. It's kind of a weird scenario, but... Excuse me. Hey, I think it works. It'd be funny to see that reveal, though. But hey, maybe Pucci and Weather get a happy life in this timeline. Or maybe Weather just gets hung by the clan, and Perla still dies. And that just leaves to Pucci just being depressed. Obviously, he'd probably still become a priest, but he would just be a lot more depressed. Probably feeling guilty about his sister and his brother's death, and probably having to carry that guilt with him. Whether or not he ever would have gotten that help is hard to say. I do know a lot of people in like religious groups tend to eventually get past a lot of their past demons by like accepting God. It's kind of hard to say with Pucci. Without Dio's influencing, I could see him actually getting saved again. I mean, hey, in the Bible, they were able to save Paul, who was murdering Christians, so... Hey, I guess someone like Pucci, who got his brother killed by the KKK and causes his younger sister to kill herself, he could get redeemed, maybe, by God. But, yeah. Enemy-wise, I think one obvious one is that the Stone Ocean Dio brothers don't exist. Like Giorno, Ungolo, Rikil, and Donatello were all the products of Dio. No Dio means no Donatello, no Rikil, and no Ungolo. So, like Giorno, they're cut out of the story. Obviously. Unless you want to go the route of Diavolo having illegitimate children here, but like... Why would he go to Florida in the first place? And plus, he already went to Florida and had an illegitimate son. His name is Anasui. Cringe joke aside, we still probably could get the same enemies, maybe different enemies. Maybe enemies connected to OG Passione, I guess. Like John Gallier, like Pucci, John Gallier is also getting replaced. Hey, who knows, maybe we can get someone from the canon part 5 in this story. Who knows, that'd actually be kind of cool. Now I think about it, maybe you could actually include a canon part 5 enemy in the story. Probably not, though. But, I guess another question is, which enemies could probably show up in the story? It's kind of hard to say. I could see maybe the enemy having either the arrow with them, like that last arrow that Diavolo had left over or something, and maybe the main story is about them trying to take over the Requiem arrow. Like maybe Jolene had the arrow when Jolene gets locked in the punishment ward. That's the thing they're going after, the Requiem arrow. They take the arrow from Jolene, and maybe the final half of the story is dedicated to the main villain getting Requiem at the end, and then the main villain could get some kind of overpowered stand to take that role of Pucci and Made in Heaven. And this would be really, really, really weird at this point because it's hard to write the rest of the story down. I obviously think another change I would like to address is that I actually think more characters would show up from the past. Like I see Kakyoin, Polnareff, Dominic, Nico, Rose, Julius, they would all show up. Maybe Iggy. Probably not. Iggy's probably long dead. He either dies in part 4 or he's just dead from old age. Whole Horse could also show up if he's still alive, which I assume he is. Joseph would show up because of his hormone training, so he's actually going to be helpful. Maybe Stroheim or Caesar can be here if they're still alive. Maybe Caesar's siblings are here, actually, which could be kind of cool to see. It's really hard to say what's going to happen later on in the story, and this is kind of just weird in general on what Part 6 would be like. I could see Requiem playing some kind of big role. If you guys have your ideas for the main villain stand, maybe like a stand in the beginning that can be like memory related, or like maybe a stand that could help out with what their motivation can be, and maybe the arrow can just be their big motivation, like the Requiem arrow, or like Requiem in general could be their motivation. Like maybe they find out about Requiem by some miracle. I don't know if it would be by Diavolo. Maybe it's by Enya who tells them about Requiem, or maybe something like that. I don't know. But it would be hard to make an excuse for Requiem to exist in the story. But I think that would be the only excuse for the main villain to actually go after them, using Stand Arrow Evolution to be their main excuse. And that could probably just lead to Jolene going after them, in my opinion. I'm saying them because I don't know if it's going to be a guy or a girl. It would be cool to have a female main villain, though. Maybe it's a male. I would like to see a female main villain to kind of complement the first female JoJo. But it's a hard story to write around for Part 6. Part 5 and 6 are overall just very hard to write around. Like, I still think we can get an adventure in Italy during 2001, maybe from the perspective of Trish or Frito. And I still think we could get a storyline based on Jolene, but you'd have to probably use Passione as an excuse, since Jotaro killed Diavolo back in the late 80s. That could lead to Passione really wanting to kill Jotaro and the remaining Crusaders. But I could see Joseph probably sacrificing himself and maybe like dying at the end for it. But whether or not the main villain could actually, or maybe the main villain could pull off a Pucci and actually get the entire cast wiped out. But they would have no weather report stand disc, so it would be kind of hard to say. Honestly, the events of Stone Ocean is just hard to say in general, because we're making up a new main villain, maybe even some new side villains as a whole. If you guys have your own ideas, leave them in the comments. And that's really all I got to say for the video. Maybe I can do an update. Maybe if I can think of some ideas for I can leave them down for commenters if they're interested in hearing what the story would look like for Part 5 and 6. If you guys have any main villain ideas, or just side villain ideas in general for the parts, let me know in the comments. Not exactly the most ideal 500 subscriber special, but I made it work, I personally believe. It's just a video in general. I think I did a good job with the video. I explained as much as I can. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was a weird video, but it's honestly an interesting concept to me, especially since it's one of those what-ifs that people do tend to talk about, but no one's ever done a video on it to my knowledge. So, I might as well have been the first one to take my crack at it. If anyone else wants to do their own take on the comments or in a video of their own, cool. If you want to do a video and was inspired by this video, cool, link the video to me or at me so I can watch it in my own spare time. That's all for the video. Thanks for 500 subscribers. Thank God for 500 subscribers. Thank everyone in general for just staying supportive on the channel and just being overall just great people and just enjoying my content and just enjoying me as a person in general. I just appreciate you guys so much that words can't even describe how much I appreciate this. I thank you so much. I love you guys for just getting me to this point, and I'm just happy that I can at least nerd out and just say whatever and just do all this kind of stuff and just have fun with myself, have fun with you guys, and yet people aren't going to judge me or like not going to make me feel like crap, and it's just, honestly, it's a nice experience. It's just nice that I can just go out here, be genuine with you guys, and just try to be nice. It's just a great experience, and I'm just thankful that I have so many just loyal people who just love me. I don't know how you can stand up with my weird videos, my just overall not that interesting content, but I appreciate you guys. Just from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Goodbye.